So, little chicken talk tonight. So, yeah, well, I was gonna do this when I was doing chores, but it's a little hard in the dark. So, anyway, somewhere between 8 and 10,000 years ago, chickens were wild and free and became domesticated. They were descendants of the jungle fowl, not just one. It's often believed that they came from the red jungle fowl, but there's other versions of jungle fowl that apparently they've realized they came from. Predominantly in the Southeast Asia area, from what they recollect, or what they assume by DNA tests and stuff. As we all know, they're direct descendants of dinosaurs, the little velociraptors that they are. Yeah, they're super, super cute, and but they certainly act like little dinosaurs. And yeah, so they were domesticated roughly about 8,000, 10,000 years ago. And they weren't always, from what I understand, used for food. Even though they're one of the most predominantly eaten animals in the world, pork's actually the #1 meat consumed in the world. If you want to check me on that, go right ahead. Chicken's right up there, and of course beef is. But yeah, so it's rumored or thought that maybe chickens were used for battle purposes. Cockfighting was actually a thing up until recently, and it still is in parts of the world. But some of the olden time people would do the fights, or would use a chicken to decide how they were going to do in the battle the following day. And that's myth or rumor or legend, I guess, is the best way to put it. It's not anything set in stone. It's just a possibility. And of course, the cuisine of the chicken is so versatile, and so obviously that was the next step. So a lot of the chickens were derived from these jungle fowl, and a little offshoot of DNA strands would go this way, a little offshoot of DNA strands would go this way, and they are product of their environment. That's kind of what the word landrace means. Landrace chicken is something that has pretty much come into existence almost on its own with very little human interaction. So there's lots of breeds left out there that are still landrace. I raise a couple of them. One of them for certain is the Dorking, out of the English region. Dates back at least to the Roman Empire, if not before that. Yeah, so that's kind of a brief overview. Chickens were probably really easy, or fowl, if you will, were probably really easy to domesticate, seeing how they're easy to keep. They're pretty happy around humans, most of them, and they pretty much just want to eat. So as long as you provide them with food, water, housing, they can be somewhat domesticated fairly easy. A wild chicken today probably wouldn't last out in the wild. But leads me to another point. Derived from jungle fowl. It's pretty important to remember, because that's their ancestors. That's how they lived. That's how they survived, is in the jungle. So they had shrubbery, they had cover, they had trees, jungle-raised flocks, even today, forest-raised flocks, tend to do pretty goddamn good. And, there's a big hit on pasture-raised and cage-free and all these other buzzwords out there that are oftentimes just used for marketing. that, you know, if you really knew your history about the chicken, you'd realize that a pasture is not someplace that they normally would be if they were still wild and free. They would be in the shrubs and the, you know, the jungles and the thick forests and things of that nature. That's where their cover is. They can get a good ample supply of food. They can still get sunlight, and they have the protection of the forest canopy from aerial predators, as well as a lot of ground predators. If they're in a thicket, they're able to get away from some ground predators, whereas in a field scenario or pasture, where are they going to go? They're not going to hide in the grass. They're not going to fly up into a tree limb or, you know, dance from branch to branch to get away from them. So, yeah, there's a place for pasture-raised chicken. That's what I raise. I don't have no jungles here, and I've got a small bit of forest, so they do get to play around in that once in a while, but I do have to let that rest and recuperate in just like the pastures. Pasture raised is great. They still get the bugs. They still get a lot of nutrients from the grass. Chickens are not vegetarian, and a chicken that is fed a vegetarian diet is not getting everything it needs. It's not good for the chicken. It's not natural. That's not their natural diet. And it's just another ploy to get you to buy something depending on your beliefs or your feelings. We put so many human emotions on animals that it's disgusting. And, you know, they're not human. We're not a chicken. We're not a dog. We're not a pig. So putting our emotions on them isn't really fair. It's not how they were raised in the wild. It's not where their ancestors are from. And it's not, they're not human. So we have to make that disconnect somewhere. See, when you do this, you know, everything meshes great. But you still got all this shit out here that don't make sense. Well, that's part of it. So anyway, that's a little chicken history for you. I want to touch on this feed deal that's going on. Back in late October, November-ish, somewhere in that cutoff, a lot of people started complaining that their chickens stopped laying eggs. Well, and they're still complaining that they haven't started. Here in Kentucky, it's been kind of a messed up winter. It hasn't been super cold. We've had cold spells. We've had cold snaps. But there's so many factors that go into why chickens lay eggs and why they don't. And the big thing right now, depending on who you talk to and what you go watch, if you go on TikTok and type in chicken talk, you're going to get all sorts of stuff. If you type in feed talk, you're going to get all sorts of stuff about people thinking that the feed is causing these problems. There are just as many, if not more, small farmers, big farmers, etc., that are getting plenty of eggs as there are people who are not. Probably more. And the majority of the problem with not getting eggs in the winter has to do with a ton of different reasons. Chickens are naturally supposed to take a break when the weather changes. It's a molt. It's called molt. They go through the molt. They lose some feathers. They stop laying eggs. And it might be for 6 weeks. It might be for 3 months. And it varies by breed. It varies by age. It varies by all sorts of things. A younger chicken, like a pullet, a first-year pullet, might still lay during the winter and might not molt as hard as a second-year chicken. So their age plays into it. Their breed plays into it. The weather plays into it. Their housing plays into it. Not every chicken coop is conducive to every breed that everybody has. It's just not. You have to know your breed, and you have to research and research and research and figure out what's going to work best. And there's a lot of trial and error. Well, let's talk about water. If they don't have water 24/7, clean, fresh water 24/7, they're not going to lay eggs. If they don't have 14 to 16 hours of daylight, 12, 14, 16 hours of daylight, they're not going to lay eggs. If you produce artificial light, and I've done this in the past, I've given my chickens artificial light, and they continue to lay all winter long. A lot of mine are not raised in a barn type scenario, so they don't get artificial light. They'll go through their molt and they'll lay when they're ready to lay. They get their rest, they get their natural rest. When the weather and everything else turns and the daylight gets longer, that's when they start laying eggs. Now, I have geese that are laying like nobody's business, and it's only February. So it's a little early for them. They usually don't lay this early in my experience, but we'll see how that plays out. I have ducks that are just starting to lay, and they'll go through the same thing. They'll go through a break, and I mean, they need it. They can't. It's like asking them to produce a baby every single day of the year. Now, I raise black astrolorps as my egg layers, and they hold the world record. That breed holds the world record for the most amount of eggs laid of chickens, unless that's changed in the last year or two. And I believe the number was 364. I think the chicken missed one day. And at any rate, when it comes time for them to take their molt break, I'm going to give them that. Their body needs that break. It needs that rest. It needs, it doesn't need stimulating light all day unless you're just a massive egg producer and that's what you do. If you want to raise them as close to Mother Nature intended as you can, humanly possible, let them go through their molt. Let them rest. They might lay 2 or 3 years longer for you. If you're just producing eggs and, you're running through 1,000 chickens every other year, then yeah, run your lights 16 hours a day and, go get the eggs. They'll lay as long as they have water in the feed. Now, I know who makes the feed for Tractor Supply, and it's a very large company, and it's not a United States company. The parent company is not a United States company. The parent company is Nestle Foods or Nestle Pet Products or something like that. That company is so large, it's one of the largest food producers in the world. They are not going to, for lack of better terms, fuck with their feed to get your eggs to stop laying, or your hens to stop laying eggs. They're not going to do it. They produce chicken feed for probably, I don't know, a half a dozen or a dozen different brand names in different bags. And it's all pretty much the same formula. I'm sure there's some give and take per brand, but it's all pretty much the same formula, the same ingredients, etc., etc. And I also know that ConAgra is a huge food producer for animals. I haven't seen one person bitch about their feed. Not one. It's all been about Purina. Back in the day, Purina, if you bought so many bags of feed, they would give you chicks. Now, they haven't done that for years, but back in the day, they would do that. If you bought so many pounds of feed for your other animals, they would literally give you baby chicks, a box of them. Here you go. And you might want to get some feed for them too. It was a sales tool for them, and I'm sure it worked pretty well. The cost of the chickens back then were probably a dime, maybe. So, they raised chickens, boom, and just gave them away to people when they bought enough feed, and got the extra sale because they had to feed the chicks too. So It was a pretty good sales tool, but they're not going to do anything to mess with their market and their feed. What messes with their market and their feed is people coming up with these cockamamie stories about how the feed is affecting the eggs production. Now, yes, granted, I've seen people post and say things like, all I did was switch feed and boom, they started laying eggs. Well, fantastic. Maybe it had a much higher protein. If you want your chickens to have more protein, give them some cat food. Cat food's very high in protein. Chickens can eat it because they're omnivores. So whatever's in cat food is usually grain and meat. They can eat both because that's what's in chicken food. And you've raised the protein content of your feed. Sometimes that helps. There's people out there saying certain herbs help. Sure, I'm not going to discount that. Might be cayenne pepper, might be thyme. There's all sorts of things that people feed chickens and companies feed chickens. I want to say it's not Purdue. I want to say it's Tyson that has farms for free range, what they call free range chickens. And these free range chickens get to eat herbs and other greenery. It's not just grass. Well, the grass here on this farm is a mixture of, I don't know, a couple hundred different grasses and herbs and all sorts of stuff. So it's a good mix, and that's not their predominant diet anyway. Their predominant diet is bugs and critters and worms and snails and mice. A chicken will eat mice. They'll eat anything that is dead or they can kill. They'll even eat each other. They have cannibalistic tendencies. If you've not experienced that, you might. So, for you to say, I'm not pointing the fingers at any particular person, but for all the people that have said it is this specific food that is causing the problems with my chickens laying eggs, I doubt it. I doubt it highly. Because they're not going to do anything to jeopardize their multi-billion-dollar chicken feed industry. They're not going to do it. Y'all have. Y'all have hurt them. You've hurt their business. That's what bad press and misinformation does. Now, I feed a lot of different things. Predominantly, I like the local feed mills. And when I can get my hands on it, and when I can get there, and when it makes sense, because I have a full-time job that keeps me away from the farm a lot, and my local feed mill is 2-hour round trip, and I got to buy enough, and I don't have storage for it, to make the trip worthwhile. Predominantly, that's all I'd feed. That is all I would feed, would be local mix. And I could have them custom mix what I want. I could say I want this protein, this percentage of protein, I want this percentage of corn or millet or whatever, oat, barley, you name it. I could say I want this, 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 and they'd custom mix it for me. And if I didn't like something, I could change it and they would change it for me. You can't get that at a feed store. You go in, you buy a bag of chicken feed, you read the label, and you go out. And I highly suggest you read the labels and get to know what the stuff in the feed is. There may be something that they're not getting enough of. I'm not saying it's bad feed. I'm just saying maybe that particular brand, they're missing something out of it. It could be oyster shell. They don't even put that in the majority of feeds. Maybe they're not getting enough calcium to manufacture eggshells. Maybe that's your problem. Maybe they're not getting enough water. Maybe they're not getting enough light. There's a whole lot of different... Did you blame the electric company for your chickens not laying eggs? No, you didn't. You went right to the feed. So, and I'm not saying changing feed might not make a difference. Maybe they were dietarily missing something or not getting enough in the other brand. Maybe they needed a change. There's a slew of different reasons. Maybe the days are getting longer because I got an hour more daylight now than I had a month ago. That's got stuff to do with it. Daylight. So I don't know. I need to get this out there, and I hope a lot of people see it, because It's not your feed. It is not your feed. If you go back to feeding them that feed in the summertime, they'll probably lay. They'll probably lay all summer, and they'll probably lay good. If the conditions are right, the weather's right, the housing's right, the chicken breed is right, the water is right, all of it. It all matters. Scientifically, that's what they do in the breeder houses. They have scientific maps of exactly what these chickens need to produce the most amount of eggs. And yes, that sounds like a factory, but let's call it what it is. It's a chicken house. It's an egg breeding facility. They make eggs. So, at any rate, enough of my soapbox. I mean, if you disagree with me, that's fine. I don't really care. I'm not here to do anything except get you to think a little bit more outside the box. You know, a multi-billion-dollar feed company is not going to jeopardize that. They're not. They're not going to do it. I don't care if they do produce eggs. I don't care. There's a shortage, supposedly. They need all the eggs they can get. They're not losing money by you raising eggs. Because if you're not buying their eggs, now you're buying their chicken feed. It's an offset. And you're raising your own eggs. They get it. They know how to make money. The problem is social media can really hurt companies. And I'm not saying that, you know, if you have a problem, you shouldn't talk about it. But you better know what the root cause of the problem is and not just guess. You better know what it is before you start defaming companies or defaming products. And that particular company, TSC, has been under scrutiny and fire since 2 years ago with a brooder system they brought in that they thought was going to work great for them, and it didn't. And they got called out on it. And now every Tractor Supply I go into has a very, very small setup, probably half or a third the size of what they used to have. So it's really hurt their business. There's no doubt in my mind. Not that chick days are their business. Let's be real here. They have the baby chicks, so you go in and buy the baby chicks. You buy the feed, you buy the lights, you buy the waterer, you buy everything, blah, 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 blah. It's a sales tool. It's not how they make all their money. It's how they get you in the door, and then other sales happen. But they've been under a lot of scrutiny by a lot of different YouTube accounts, by a lot of different TikTokers, about 4 or 5 different things in the last year. And this feed thing, I just don't think is fair. Everybody's pointing their finger at this one company, and it's Purina on top of it, which makes food for every animal in existence, pretty much, that somebody has domesticated, and has for hundreds of years. So they're really not going to, well, I'm sorry, I think I said Purina, but it's Nestle. They make human food by the drove. I think they're the largest human food company producer in the globe. Do some research on it. But anyway, yeah, and you know, I used it. I use a mix. I don't always go to the same place. Some of it depends on where I am. Some more of it depends on how much time I have, how much money I want to spend on feed that week. I mean, there's a lot of different factors why. And I've used it with my broilers, and I've had no problem, zero problem. They've grown. They're doing absolutely phenomenal. For winter broilers, I couldn't be happier and more proud of the progress that I'm having with them. So, and if you're in the Kentucky, Ohio area, I've got a batch. My first 2023 batch will be ready in a couple weeks. So shoot me a message. Go follow the links, my website and whatnot. And speaking about follow this TikTok or follow this YouTube account, and you know, like it, comment, share. This information has got to get out there, and I'm hoping that I can help spread it. So peace for now. And like I said, like, follow, comment, share. It only takes 2 seconds. Subscribe. It's free. It doesn't cost a dime to subscribe to my channel. And you'll always get notified if you click the little bell when I post a new video. So do that too. And I'm looking forward to talking to y'all again. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Like, follow, subscribe, share. Do it. Thanks. See y'all later.